I need to write a 5,000-word story in English. Let me first check the used names list to avoid them, then write the story. The names to avoid are all in the uploaded file, already in context. Let me craft completely new names. Louisa, narrator, 62. Sean, son. Amara, fiancé, villain. Delphine, housekeeper, revealer. Marcus, Amara's secret husband. Jonah, Amara's son from secret marriage. Canadian context, Ontario setting, Tim Hortons, RRSP Estate, Provincial Court, family home in Oakville. I pulled the zipper on the back of my dress 3 times before I gave up and sat on the edge of the bed. 62 years old and I still couldn't zip a dress without my husband. 40 years I've been reaching back and finding his hands there. 3 years since he'd been gone, and I still reached back. My fingers knew the motion before my brain caught up. Then the room would go quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. And I'd sit there for a moment, just breathing. I got the zipper eventually. I always do. It was a Saturday in October, which in Oakville means the maples had gone full amber and the air smelled like wood smoke and wet leaves, the kind of morning that makes you feel like everything is exactly as it should be. My son was getting engaged that afternoon. Not married, engaged. A small dinner at the Harborfront restaurant downtown, just family on both sides, maybe 20 people. He'd planned it for months. He'd called me 3 weeks before and said, "Mom, I need everything to be perfect." And I'd heard something in his voice I hadn't heard since he was 16 and trying to parallel park for the first time. That particular combination of excitement and terror. His name was Sean. He was 34, a civil engineer, and he'd spent most of his 20s buried in infrastructure projects across northern Ontario. He wasn't someone who fell easily. When he finally called me last spring and said he'd met someone, I was so relieved I sat down in the middle of my kitchen and laughed until my eyes watered. He'd been alone for a long time. Too long, I thought. Her name was Amara. She was 31, and the first time I met her at a Sunday dinner here at my house in early spring, she sat across from me and answered every question I asked with the kind of careful precision that I couldn't quite name at the time. Not rude, not cold, just precise, like she was reading from notes she prepared in advance. I told myself I was being unfair. I told myself that meeting your boyfriend's widowed mother is nerve-wracking for anyone. I poured her more wine and decided to be patient. My housekeeper's name was Delphine. She'd been coming to my house every Tuesday and Friday for 11 years. After my husband passed, I added Thursdays. Not because the house needed more cleaning, it didn't. It was just me rattling around in 4 bedrooms, but because I needed the company. Delphine was 61, Haitian-Canadian, originally from Port-au-Prince, and she had a way of moving through my kitchen that made the whole place feel inhabited. She'd known Sean since he was in his mid-20s. She called him mon cher and still occasionally scolded him about leaving wet towels on bathroom floors when he visited. I trusted her the way you trust someone who has seen you cry in your bathrobe. The afternoon of the engagement dinner, I was dressed and ready to leave by 4 o'clock. The reservation was at 6:30, but Delphine had come by that morning to help me set up the little dessert table I was bringing. A family tradition. My husband's mother used to do it, and I'd kept it going, and she was still there at 4, rewrapping the milfoil and wax paper when I came downstairs in my dress. She looked up at me. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me with an expression I didn't recognize on her face. Delphine was not a complicated woman to read. She was warm, she was direct, she laughed easily and cried at commercials. But right then, she looked like someone doing arithmetic she didn't want to finish. "You look beautiful," she said. "Thank you," I said. "You okay?" She set down the pastry. She folded the wax paper once, twice precisely, the way she did when she was stalling. "Delphine, I need to show you something," she said. "Before you go." I thought she'd broken something. A dish, maybe? A glass? I followed her into the sitting room. She took her phone out of her apron pocket and held it out to me. On the screen was a Facebook profile, a man named Marcus Webb, 41, from Mississauga. Profile photo, a broad-shouldered man with a warm smile, standing on what looked like a dock somewhere up north. I looked at Delphine. "Keep scrolling," she said quietly. I scrolled. There was a photo from 2 years ago, Marcus Webb at a backyard barbecue, holding a baby. The caption said, "My boy, 3 months." I scrolled further. A photo from a Christmas Marcus Webb at a kitchen table, a little boy maybe 18 months old in a high chair, and beside him, leaning into the frame with a smile I recognized, was Amara. I looked at Delphine. "She's his wife," Delphine said, "or she was. I don't know if they're legally separated. I don't know if there are papers. But I know they have a son together. That child is almost 2 years old. And I know that Sean doesn't know." My first thought, and I'm not proud of it, was that I was going to be sick. My second thought was, how do you know? Delphine sat down across from me on the ottoman and folded her hands in her lap, the way she did when she was being very careful with her words. She told me that she had a cousin, Nadege, who cleaned offices in a building in Mississauga, that Marcus Webb worked in that building, that Nadege and Marcus had chatted enough over the years that she knew his face, knew his name. That 3 weeks ago, Nadege had been waiting for the bus on Hurontario Street and seen a woman she didn't know talking intensely on the phone, close enough that Nadege heard her say the name Marcus, and something about, "Just get me through October," that the woman had walked past, and Nadege had thought nothing of it, until she'd looked the woman up later after seeing her tagged in a mutual acquaintance's photo from a summer event. The woman was Amara. Nadege had told Delphine. Delphine had spent 2 weeks deciding what to do. "I almost didn't tell you," she said. I went back and forth. I said to myself, maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's an old relationship. Maybe the boy is not hers. But then I kept thinking about Sean. She paused. He's been waiting for something real for so long. I couldn't let him walk into something like this. I sat there with Delphine's phone in my hand and the milky way wrapped on my kitchen counter and the October sun coming through the front windows, and I tried to think clearly. I wanted to call Sean right then. I wanted to call him and say, "Don't go, don't do anything yet, we need to talk first." But I looked at the clock. 4:15. Amara was picking him up from his condo at 5:30 to drive to the restaurant together. Her family was flying in from Calgary. His friends from work were already en route. If I called him now, frantic with a screenshot from a Facebook profile, he would think I'd lost my mind. Or worse, he would defend her before I'd even finished speaking, and I would have shown my cards with nothing solid in my hand. He'd done that before. 3 years ago, when I gently suggested that the woman he was seeing then was perhaps not being fully honest about her finances, he'd gone quiet on me for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. I'd learned my lesson. Sean was loyal to the people he chose, sometimes to a fault. I needed more than a Facebook profile. I looked at Delphine. "Does your cousin have anything else?" Delphine picked up her phone. She texted Nadege from the couch while I sat very still and tried not to think about what 20 people were doing right now, getting into their cars, picking up flowers, driving toward a restaurant downtown to celebrate something that might not be what it appeared to be. Nadege responded in 12 minutes. She had more. She sent a screenshot, a public post from a community Facebook group in Mississauga, a local parenting group, posted 8 months ago. The post was from a woman asking for recommendations for a pediatric dentist in the area. The account name was Amara W. The profile photo was Amara. The post said, "My almost 14-month-old is due for his first checkup. Looking for someone gentle and patient? We're near square one." 14 months ago, Amara's son would have been 14 months old, which meant that when Amara met Sean at a networking event in Toronto last April, her son was already born. Already walking, probably. Already sleeping in a crib in a house in Mississauga that she had never once mentioned. I put the phone down on the coffee table. "Delphine," I said, "I need you to help me think." We sat there together for 20 minutes. I thought about calling a lawyer, which was absurd given the timeline. I thought about simply not going, which solved nothing. I thought about confronting Amara privately, Maybe stepping outside the restaurant before the dinner began, which had a certain appeal but also a certain chaos. I thought about calling Sean, but every time I rehearsed the conversation in my head, it became a disaster. His defensiveness, my panic, neither of us in a position to think straight. What I kept coming back to was this. I had one chance, and I needed to use it carefully. I called my son at 4:45. I told him I was running a few minutes behind and could he please make sure to save me the seat beside him. He said, "Of course, Mom, relax. You have tons of time." He sounded happy. He sounded lighter than I'd heard him in years. I had to press my free hand flat against my kitchen counter to stay steady. I arrived at the restaurant at 6:15, before almost anyone else. Delphine had come with me, I'd asked her, and she'd simply taken off her apron, put on her coat, and gotten into my car without a word. We sat at the bar and I ordered a sparkling water and she ordered the same, and we waited. Amara's family arrived first. Her mother, a well-dressed woman from Calgary named Donna, came in with Amara's younger sister and a man I took to be an uncle. They were warm and gracious. Donna hugged me and told me she was so happy to finally meet me and that Sean was a wonderful young man. I smiled. I smiled the way I used to smile through parent-teacher nights when I was exhausted. Sean and Amara arrived at 6:25. Amara was wearing a deep green dress. She looked beautiful. I watched her move through the room, greeting people, touching Sean's arm, laughing at something his friend from work said, and I thought, she is very good at this. Whatever else she is very good at this. Sean hugged me and I held on a beat longer than usual. He pulled back and looked at me. "You okay?" he said. "I'm wonderful," I said. "I'm so proud of you." We sat down. The menus came. I watched Amara across the table from me, and I was trying to understand what I was looking for. Some crack in the performance, some sign. But she was composed. She was attentive. She refilled Sean's water glass without being asked, and then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it. Just a glance. But something moved across her face so fast I almost missed it. Not guilt, exactly. More like the expression of someone doing rapid calculation. She turned the phone over. She smiled at something Donna was saying. She reached for her wine. I excused myself to use the restroom. In the hallway near the hostess stand, I stopped. I stood there for a moment with my hand against the cool plaster wall. I thought about my husband. I thought about how he used to say that the hardest thing about loving people is knowing when to step in front of them. I texted Sean, "I need 5 minutes with you. Can you come to the hallway by the entrance? Tell Amara you're checking on my coat or something. Please come now." He appeared 90 seconds later, concerned, jacket half buttoned. "Mom, what's going on?" I told him. Not everything, not the full story, but enough. I showed him the screenshots. I kept my voice low and level, and I watched his face go through 4 or 5 expressions in the time it takes a traffic light to change. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "Are you sure?" It wasn't a question, the way he said it. "I'm not sure of anything," I said it. "But I have 2 sources, and I have photographs, and I have a public post from 8 months ago, and I think you deserve to know before this dinner goes any further." He looked at the floor. "Sean, look at me." He looked at me. "You don't have to do anything right now," I said. "You can go back in there and act normal, and we can figure this out tomorrow. That's your choice. But you had to know. You had to." He nodded slowly. He put his hand on the wall beside mine. We stood there in the hallway of a restaurant in downtown Oakville for probably a full minute, not speaking. Then he straightened up. "I'm going to talk to her," he said. "Sean, not in front of everyone. I'll ask her to step outside with me, just to check something on the car. You stay inside." He went back into the dining room. I watched through the glass partition. I saw him lean down and say something to Amara. I saw her expression, confused, then accommodating. She stood up, said something to her mother, picked up her clutch. They walked toward the side exit together. I followed at a distance. The side exit opened onto a narrow laneway that ran along the back of the building toward the parking lot. It was cold. The amber light from the restaurant windows fell across the pavement in long rectangles, and I could hear the sound of the lake from somewhere in the distance, because you can always hear the lake in Oakville in October. I stopped at the corner of the building. I could hear them, but they couldn't see me. Sean's voice was steady and quiet. "I need you to tell me about Marcus." There was a silence. Then Amara said, "What?" "Marcus Webb. Mississauga. The little boy who's about 20 months old." A pause. "Your little boy." Another silence. Longer. "Sean." Her voice changed. Something slid out of it. The warmth, maybe. The precision. Something. "Where did you hear that? Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters. Because whoever told you, it matters because it's true," he said. "Isn't it?" The silence this time was the longest. When she finally spoke, her voice was very controlled. She said she and Marcus had separated before she met Sean, that the separation had been informal, that the child, she said the child, not my son, was a complicated situation, that she had been going to tell Sean, she had been planning to tell him. She just needed to find the right time. Sean said, "We've been together for 8 months." She said, "I know." He said, "Are you still legally married to him?" She didn't answer. That was its own answer. I walked back inside. I went to the bar where Delphine was sitting, and I sat down beside her, and she looked at my face and put her hand over mine on the bar top. "Okay," she said quietly. "He knows," I said. She squeezed my hand. It took another 6 minutes. Sean came back in through the side door alone. He walked straight to the table. He spoke quietly to Amara's mother first, and I could see from Donna's face that she was confused, then alarmed, then something harder to name. Sean's friends read the room and went very still. The man I'd taken to be Amara's uncle looked toward the side exit. Sean came and stood beside me at the bar. "She's still outside," he said. "Are you all right?" "No," he said. "Then I will be." He turned to face the dining room. He thanked everyone for coming. He said he was sorry, that the evening wasn't going to continue as planned, that he'd explain what he could when he could, but that right now he needed everyone to go home. His voice was even. It broke once on the word home, just slightly, but he recovered. Donna left without saying anything to me. Her face was unreadable. I respected that. Whatever her daughter had done, she'd just watched her family evening collapse in a restaurant hallway, and she didn't owe me composure. Sean's friends from work stayed long enough to make sure he didn't need them. One of them, a man he'd known since university, hugged him for a long moment near the door and said something I couldn't hear. Sean nodded. They left. Delphine and I stayed. We drove Sean home. He sat in the back seat of my car the way he used to sit when he was small. Not quite touching the door, not quite centered in that particular way children have of existing in space when they're overwhelmed. I put the heat on. The radio was off. Delphine sat in the passenger seat and said nothing, which was exactly right. At his building, he got out and leaned back through the open window. "How did you know?" he said. "How did you find out?" I told him about Delphine's cousin, about the bus stop, about Nadege recognizing her name. He looked at Delphine. "Thank you," he said. He said it simply, the way my husband used to say things he really meant. Delphine said, "Go inside, sleep. Tomorrow it looks different." He did. We found out more over the following weeks, the way you always find out more, in pieces, from various directions, each piece slightly worse than the last. Amara and Marcus Webb had married in 2022. A small civil ceremony in Brampton, which would have taken us about 40 seconds to find had we ever thought to look. They had a son together named Elias. I learned his name later, and the name made me sad in a way I didn't expect, because whatever else was true, Elias was a real small person with no part in any of this. The marriage had struggled, apparently, and Amara had relocated from Mississauga to a rental in Toronto's East End, but she and Marcus had never filed for divorce. There were later some questions raised about the financial picture, whether she had represented herself to Sean as having property in Calgary that turned out not to exist, whether some of the conversations about their future housing situation had included figures that weren't accurate. Sean had consulted a lawyer by the end of October, not for drama, just to understand what, if anything, needed to be done. Amara contacted him once, about 2 weeks after the engagement dinner. A long email. I didn't read it. It wasn't mine to read. Sean described it to me as a lot of explaining that didn't explain much. He didn't respond. I thought about her mother, Donna, sometimes. I wondered if she'd known. I decided, eventually, that it didn't matter, wondering what other people know, and when they knew it, and whether they should have said something. That's a rabbit hole that never ends well. I stayed out of it. What I thought about more, in the weeks after, was that particular moment standing in the restaurant hallway with my hand on the cold plaster wall. The moment before I texted Sean, the moment when I could have turned around and gone back to my seat and let the dinner proceed, told myself it wasn't my place, told myself he would find out eventually in his own time. I've had those moments before. I suspect every mother has. The moment when you decide whether you're going to step in front of something or step aside and hope it misses. My husband used to say the hardest part isn't knowing what's right. The hardest part is the 3 seconds before you do it, when every reason not to comes flooding in at once. I thought about him a lot that October. By November, Sean had started running again. He used to run along the Lakeshore Trail before everything got busy, and he stopped. He texted me a photo one Sunday morning, his sneakers on the trail, the lake flat and silver behind him. Just the photo, no caption. I knew what it meant. I kept the milfoil in the freezer for 2 weeks after. I didn't know what else to do with it. Eventually, on a Thursday, Delphine came and we sat at the kitchen table and ate it with strong tea, and she told me about something funny that had happened with Nadejda's bus route, and I laughed, properly laughed, the kind that goes through your chest, for the first time in a while. The maple in the front yard had dropped all its leaves by then. The garden was bare and quiet, the way it gets before the first snow, holding still. Some mornings I still reach back for the zipper, but I'm getting better at finding it myself. I've thought a lot about what it actually takes to do the right thing when the stakes are personal. Not the big, abstract right thing. The kind you read about or nod along to in a conversation. I mean the specific, terrifying, real right thing. The one where you're standing in a restaurant hallway in your good dress with a sparkling water in your hand and 20 people are waiting at a table and your son is smiling for the first time in years. And you have to decide in the next 60 seconds whether to say something or go sit down. That's the one I mean. What I've come to understand is that Delphine did something that night that took more integrity than most people give themselves credit for. She sat with what she knew for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of going back and forth, of talking herself out of it, of telling herself it wasn't her place, and then she decided it was. Not because it was easy, because it was right. That's not a small thing. That's actually one of the harder things a person can do, choose honesty when silence is so much more comfortable. And I think about Amara, too. Not with anger, not anymore. More with a kind of tired clarity. She made a series of choices that created a reality she then had to manage constantly, from every direction all at once. The energy that takes, the vigilance. The phone buzzing on a restaurant table and that flicker across her face that lasted less than a second. That's what a life built on concealment looks like from the outside. It doesn't look free. It looks exhausting. Whatever she was hoping to find in a new city, a new name on a lease, a new man who didn't know her history, I don't think she found it. You can't find rest in a life you have to keep explaining to yourself. Sean is running again. That sounds like a small thing, but it isn't. When people go through something that shakes them at the foundation, you watch for the small signs. The text message photo, the Sunday morning run, the laugh at dinner that sounds like him again. Those are the signs that matter. He didn't collapse. He was hurt, genuinely hurt, in the way that only comes from having trusted someone fully. But he didn't let it make him smaller. That takes a kind of resilience that isn't loud or dramatic. It's just the quiet decision, made over and over, to keep going. I think that's what I want to say to anyone listening to this story. Not that you should be suspicious of the people you love. Not that mothers always know best, because we don't, not always. But that the truth, even when it arrives at the worst possible moment in the worst possible way, is still the better option. Every single time. The truth gives you something to stand on. Everything built around a lie is, eventually, just wait. Delphine and I ate the mille-feuille eventually. It was a Thursday in November. Cold enough that I put the storm windows in and she made the tea strong the way she does, and we sat at my kitchen table and ate pastry that was slightly too freezer-touched and laughed about it. That afternoon mattered to me more than I can explain. It was ordinary in exactly the right way. The maple out front had lost everything by then, but it was still standing,